Good afternoon, and welcome back to our last public witness hearing covering tribal governments under the jurisdiction of the Interior, Environment, and Appropriations Subcommittee. I have to say, this has been excellent conversations, excellent testimony. We've learned a lot, and so I'm very appreciative of everyone being here. We've heard about our failed trust and treaty obligations in regards to lands, trust, and natural resources, the impacts that climate change is having on Native Americans. We heard about public safety and justice needs this morning and the challenges facing the Bureau of Indian Education Schools. We begin this afternoon's hearing with the last panel with a topic that's still education focused, moving to tribal government and then to human services. As I mentioned yesterday at the start of the hearing, this is the first time we've organized witnesses according to topic testimony, and we would very much appreciate your feedback on how you think it went and how we can improve the process for next year. As we begin, I'd like to just go over the hearing logistics again. We're going to have each panel, and the first panel is right here, ready to go, and we're going to have each witness speak for 5 minutes to present their testimony. We're going to use a timer to track the time, and when the light turns yellow, you'll have a minute left, and when it turns red, we would like you to conclude your remarks if you would, please. I'm going to lightly tap the gavel. I don't mean to be rude, but we want to make sure. I know everybody in this room has other appointments on their schedule and that, and people have planned accordingly to the time slots we have. If votes are called during the hearing, and that is very unlikely, but if it does, we'll let you know, and then we'll take a brief recess for members to vote, and then we'll return back to where we left off. But it looks like we're good. We aren't going to have votes until 4 or 4:30, so it looks great. Witnesses are asked to stay close to the hearing room in case that does happen, though, so that we can return right away. And I'd also like to remember those in the hearing room that there's committee rules, and they prohibit the use of cameras and audio equipment during the hearing by any individuals without House-issued press credential or some of our personal staff. And with that, I'd like to turn to my good friend, Mr. Stewart, for any opening remarks he might have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be brief, knowing that we want to get right to work. Thank you for your continuing these important hearings to get input from our tribal leaders on what is obviously a wide array of programs and have this subcommittee's jurisdiction. Especially warm welcome to the distinguished tribal leaders, the tribal elders, as they'll be here testifying today, including some from my home state, the Ute tribe in Utah. My great state was proudly named after the great tribe, Ute tribe. We have other tribal entities there as well, but it's important to me, it's important to the West, but frankly, as you've made the point, Madam Chair, this is a responsibility that's important to all of Congress. We have a special responsibility in our relationship with the tribes in honoring some of the tribal trusts and the treaties. This isn't just something that's important to individuals in the West or other pockets around the country. So we look forward to listening and to learning from you, hearing what's on your mind, and maybe just a bit of housekeeping, if you will, and that is my apologies in advance to some of those who will be testifying today. And as the chairwoman has pointed out, many of us sit on other committees that we're going to be bouncing back and forth. And please don't take that as any indication that we're not interested. We clearly are. We'll have your written testimonies, other ways of communicating with you. And we look forward to and are grateful for you being here. And we'll spend as much time as we possibly can and look forward to that. And thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Amade, anything you'd like to add?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to associate myself with your remarks and those of my colleague from the Beehive State, and I yield back.
Thank you. We are going to first hear from Diane Cornier. I might not have said your name totally right. Please correct it for the record if I did not pronounce it right. The Interim Executive Director for the National Indian Education Association. Welcome.
Diana Conoyer. Thank you.
Conoyer.
Thank you, Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the National Indian Education Association. NIA is the most inclusive national organization advocating for culturally relevant educational opportunities for American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiians. Each day, our organization equips tribal leaders, educators, and advocates to prepare the over 650,000 Native students across the nation for success in the classroom and beyond. Native education is a bipartisan effort. We understand this. In the federal trust responsibility to it is a federal trust responsibility to tribal nations, and I thank you for making that comment at the beginning. NIA thanks the subcommittee for this ongoing commitment to fulfilling this constitutional responsibility by rejecting severe cuts proposed for Native education programs and services in fiscal year 2019. In particular, we appreciate the subcommittee's oversight of BIE programs and services for Native students, as well as the $238.3 million investment in construction for safe and healthy schools for Native students in fiscal year 2019. As the subcommittee considers funding levels for the upcoming fiscal year, Congress must continue to invest in and oversee BIE programs to ensure Native students have access to resources necessary to thrive. From competitive salaries for highly effective, culturally competent educators through the Indian Schools Equalization Program to technological infrastructure of a modern classroom to Native language and culture-based programs, federal appropriations are vital to ensuring equity for the only students to which the federal government has a direct responsibility, Native students. NIA urges you to continue your commitment to Native students by fully funding Native education within the BIE in fiscal year 2020 appropriations. As the subcommittee considers appropriations for fiscal year 2020, NIA urges Congress to consider the full scope of need for education programs in the Department of Interior through the BIE and the BIA. Three of NIA's key appropriations priorities for fiscal year 2020 are: Bureau-funded schools must be appropriated $430 million for urgent school construction and repair. NIA appreciates the recent steps to address this critical infrastructure need in BIE schools through education construction in fiscal year 2018-2019 appropriations. Despite these strides forward, funding continues to fall short of the full need, slowing progress in the three remaining schools from the 2004 school construction list and 10 schools from the 2016 construction list. In 2016, the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Interior found that it would cost $430 million to address immediate facility repairs in the BIE. In addition, that report estimated over $1.3 billion in overall need for education construction at the BIE schools. Though current funding levels fail to fully address the $634 million need, the need for construction and repair in BIE schools is too great to wait for a possible infrastructure package without ongoing funding to address construction needs. In addition, 7 schools on the 2016 construction list have yet to receive these funds for design and construction. The Indian School Equalization Program should be fully funded at $431 million for fiscal year 2020. And finally, NIA requests that Congress invest $35 million to develop assessments for the Bureau-funded schools under the Every Student Succeeds Act. Like you, NIA is concerned about BIE accountability. Over the past year, we have reached out to Secretary Zinke, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Bureau of Indian Education regarding outstanding requests from Congress contained in previous appropriation reports. We look forward to working with the subcommittee to ensure that Native students have access to highly effective, culturally relevant education programs no matter where they attend school. In conclusion, healthy education systems are key to thriving tribal nations and communities. Though tribal leaders and legislators juggle a number of priorities, don't forget that education is also one of them. Appropriations have the potential to promote equity and ensure access to excellent education options which prepare Native students to thrive. NIA urges Congress to uphold the federal trust responsibility by fully funding key programs that support effective and culturally appropriate Native education programs. Thank you.
with the Grant School Association, correct?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Marlene Watashi. I am the president of the Diné Grant School Association, DGSA. DGSA is comprised of school boards of 7 Bureau of Indian Education-funded schools, which are operated under the Tribally Controlled Schools Act, Public Law 100-297. Our member schools are located on the Navajo Nation Reservation in New Mexico and Arizona. The Indian School Equalization Program formula is the core budget account for educational and residential programs for the BIE, elementary and secondary schools, and dormitories. We appreciate that Congress has provided program increases in this area the past several fiscal years. For most BIE funded schools, the chronic shortfall in the other key school accounts has a negative impact on ISEP formula funding, because ISEP formula funds are often diverted to make up the shortfalls in other accounts, such as facilities operations and maintenance, when a tribe or tribal school board has no other source of funding to cover these shortfalls. This means fewer funds are available for instructional activities. We are tremendously grateful that Congress has increased funding for these critical accounts, so ISEP formula funds can be used for its intended purpose. The $1.28 million program increase for a total of $404.2 million that Congress provided in FY 2019 from 2018 was very helpful. However, the total amount still does not acknowledge the shortfalls that have been building up for many years. Therefore, we respectfully request an additional increase in ISEP formula funding for fiscal year 2020. Tribal grant support costs. Since the 1988 Elementary and Secondary Education Act reauthorization, tribally operated elementary and secondary schools have received funding for the administrative expenses incurred for the operation of BIE-funded schools through an administrative cost grant, now called Tribal Grant Support Costs. These funds are used for essential services such as grant contract administration, program funding and development, required annual audit, and other overhead expenses. We would like to express our appreciation for this subcommittee's commitment to fully funding tribal grant support costs and express support for its continuation in FY 2020. The Early Childhood and Family Development Budget category, commonly referred to as the FACE program, is designed to 1, strengthen family-school community relations, 2, increase parent participation in education, and 3, support parents in their role as the child's first and most important teacher. Many of DGSA's member schools run successful FACE programs. There is a marked academic difference in outcomes for children who have access to a FACE program and those who do not. Further, these programs strengthen families and communities and help increase parent engagement. We respectfully ask that the subcommittees continue to reject any administrative proposal to zero out this vital program and to continue to provide adequate funding to support the FACE program in FY 2020. Road maintenance. This subcommittee have highlighted the poor conditions and backlog of deferred maintenance of unimproved roads and bridges in Indian country that are used by school buses to transport students. We would like to thank the subcommittee for attempting to hold the BIA accountable and for providing additional funding directed to these school routes. We respectfully request that the subcommittee increase funding directed to these school bus routes for FY 2020 and continue your effort to hold the BIA accountable. I appreciate the opportunity to provide this testimony. Thank you.
Maxine Coho, Vice President
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Chairwoman and Subcommittee members. I am Maxine Coe, the Vice President for the Raymond Alpha School Board. On behalf of the Raymond Alpha School Board, Raymond Alpha community, thank you for giving us this opportunity to give our oral testimony. I want to focus my remarks today on our facilities. We appreciate that the facilities operation maintenance budget have seen some increases in recent years. While the recent increases for these budget categories are important improvements, we note that the FY 2017 budget justification points out that the amount requested would only fund 78% of the calculated facilities operation and maintenance across BIE-funded schools. Neither the FY 2018 budget justification nor the FY 2019 budget justification bothered to provide an estimate for what full funding would be. Additionally, continuing resolutions and government shutdowns make it much more difficult to manage these facilities efficiently and effectively. Deferred maintenance and inadequate facility conditions directly affect our student learning opportunities. At Raymond Navajo on the Raymond Alpha Reservation, our library, our kindergarten, and our gymnasium have all suffered impacts from leaking roofs, and we lack funding to take action to address these problems, which could possibly cause serious health and safety problems for our students and teachers and communities. And I often wonder how this is going to affect our community, our students, and our parents in the future. At Rama, due to the black mold, we had to close our library and kindergarten and move them to portable buildings, which provides very limited space for a library, and those portable buildings do not have lightning protection. Pine Hill schools are on the highest peak in our area, and lightning has hit our antenna, our water treatment, and this is a serious safety concern. The BIA does not want to invest resources for lightning protection on these portable buildings. Our gymnasium remains in use. Fiberglass ceiling tiles have deteriorated from water damage, and we now have concerns because the students breathe the dust from these tiles. We host sporting events in our gymnasium, and the condition is very damaging to our reputation. Raymond Alpha was the first to operate a school under the Indian Self-Determination Act. This is a proud history for the Raymond Alpha community. But when students and parents from other schools see the condition in our gymnasium, it is very embarrassing to our students, our parents, and our community. We believe this is having a negative impact on our enrollment. Parents don't want to send their kids to a school facility that's deteriorating and in very bad conditions. Additionally, the New Mexico Athletic Association reported to our school that they were very concerned about the health and safety issues at our gymnasium and requested we address these problems. We at the Raymond Alpha understand we are not the only BIE-funded school with deteriorating facilities. The Department of Interior 2019 budget justification indicates that 1 out of every 3 BIE-funded schools is in poor condition. As a result, many BIE-funded schools are being written up for health and safety violations, but there's no funding to make the needed changes. The subcommittee is fully aware of the close relationship between poor facility conditions and poor student and staff performance. The inadequate learning environment in many BIE schools put our Native students at an unfair advantage. The schools are then blamed for low academic performance. We respectfully ask the subcommittee to provide full, consistent funding for facility operation and facility maintenance. According to the Department of Interior, the backlog is as high as $1.3 billion. The BIA stated that the next step is to develop a long-term school construction plan that will address the needs of the BIE-funded school determined to be in poor condition. We respectfully request that Congress and the administration consult with tribes when developing this long-term school replacement and repair plan. We're grateful for the leadership, for your leadership in addressing the BIE facilities and addressing our outdated and poor condition schools that are very dangerous to our students and our staff and our community. Given the state of school facilities across the BIE system, we ask the subcommittee to continue increasing school construction and replacement funds. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to make our oral testimony.
Thank you, and 40 years.
Yes.
Independent school district. I saw that in the testimony, pretty amazing. Russ McDonald? I saw that's what you prefer to be called, and I remember that from last time. Welcome, United Tribes Technical College. Good to have you here.
Thank you to the subcommittee, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to share a few words. My name is Leander McDonald. I'm an enrolled member of the Spirit Lake Dakota Nation and a proud descendant of the Sauna, Shadatsa, and the Hunkpapa people. I'm president of the United Tribes Technical College located in Bismarck, North Dakota. We are thankful for the opportunity to present and thankful for your efforts for passing the fiscal year 2019 budget as we now prepare for fiscal year 2020. I also want to thank you, Madam Chair, for your opening statements yesterday regarding trust responsibility and also Mr. Stewart's comments this afternoon. United Tribes Technical College is celebrating 50 years of educational service, 25 years as a 1994 land-grant institution, and 37 years of accreditation by the Higher Learning Commission. The legacy of workforce development and employment training continues through the offering of 3 certificates, 5 Associate Applied Science, 9 Associate of Science, and 4 Bachelor of Science degrees. BIE funds are essential to the viability of United Tribes' core post-secondary career and technical education programs and the overall mission as a tribal college and university. We serve some of the most impoverished, high-risk Indian students from throughout the nation. Despite such challenges, we have consistently had excellent retention and placement rates. United Tribes is one of the only intertribal colleges and universities in the nation. We are governed by the 5 tribes located wholly or in part in the state of North Dakota. We are not part of the North Dakota university system, and we do not have a tax base. However, we do receive limited state-appropriated funds for non-Native students. The federal BIE appropriations the UTTC receives are critical to the post-secondary education of American Indian and Alaska Native students to obtain the skills necessary to become employed. The funding requests for United Tribes for fiscal year 2020 BIA are twofold. $10 million for the line item tribal technical colleges, which compares to the fiscal year 2019 enacted level of $7.5 million, and 2, establishment of a tribally administered Northern Plains Law Enforcement Center at United Tribes Technical College. United Tribes administers our BIE funding under a Indian Self-Determination Education Assistance Act agreement and has done so for 42 years. The United Tribes portion of the Tribal Technical College's line item should be $6.8 million based on a $10 million appropriation. Acquisition of additional base funding is critical to our struggle to maintain course offerings and services to provide educational services at the same level as our state counterparts. Funding for United Tribes Technical College is a good investment. We have an unduplicated count of 525 students in 17-18, with 494 of those being degree seeking. Approximately 84% of the 494 degree seeking undergraduate students are low income and receive Pell Grants for the 17-18 academic year. United Tribes had a 17-18 fall-to-fall retention rate of 51% and a 2017 fall-to-spring semester persistence rate of 75%. Using the North Dakota State Longitudinal Data System, which tracks graduates who gain employment within North Dakota, United Tribes graduates attained a placement rate of 64%. Note this number does not include those who may have been employed outside of North Dakota. The system doesn't track those who leave the state. The fall graduates from December 2017 who are employed in North Dakota earned an average of $7,400 in the third quarter after they graduated, which averages to about $30,000 annually. Campus services include a child development center, family literacy program, wellness center, area transportation, K-7 BIE funded elementary school, tutoring, counseling, family and single student housing, and campus security. A North Dakota State University study reports that 5 tribal colleges in North Dakota made a direct and secondary economic contribution to the state of $92 million in 2016, and the United Tribes had a $59.6 million direct and secondary economic impact on the Bismarck Mandan communities for the same period. A few words on the Northern Plains Indian Law Enforcement Academy. The Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association, via Resolution 5-1-20-16, requests that the Secretary of Interior and the BIA consult with the tribes on the details for a plan of establishment of a Northern Plains Indian Law Enforcement Academy. Given our established criminal justice program, United Tribes location and campus resources, we ask that you direct the Secretary of Interior and BIA to work with the Northern Plains tribes and others to establish an academy to better serve the tribes residing in the northern tier of the United States. We recognize collaboration and the sharing of resources among tribal, state, and federal training initiatives, such as the proposed Savannah's Act legislation, are critical to decreasing criminal activity throughout Indian country. This model, once developed, may allow additional opportunities to collaborate on related issues such as decreasing dangerous drug activity and sex trafficking. Senate Committee on Indian Affairs is holding a field hearing on March 20th on our campus, and that's on the joint law enforcement activities and importance of the collaboration between tribal and non-tribal law enforcement agencies. United Tribes stands ready to assist educationally by ensuring a well-trained law enforcement workforce is available to address these social ills should a Northern Plains Law Enforcement Academy be considered. We know members of the subcommittee have made a point to visit places in Indian country, and we would love to be able to arrange for you to visit United Tribes Technical College campus. Thank you for your consideration of the request.
Thank you. I'm going to take I haven't been taking the first question all the time, but I am on this one. So, pre-K is something that in our states everybody's talking about. And you mentioned VAS's program, and some of you have Head Start, and there's different programs out there. And and having kids with that little bit of extra comfort with going to school or feeling confident that they can succeed when they walk in, even for kindergarten, can be a huge game changer. Can you, and Head Start is not funded out of this committee, it's out of the Education Committee, I realize that. But what has been your experience, because you talked about the FACE program, which is a little different because that involves parents, and you even have GED available and that. And I'd be interested in knowing kind of what's going on with the daycare situation, if you have a highly qualified daycare, if you're providing Head Start programming or that at the technical college. Because you've got me on the buildings. We're working on the buildings, and you know, when a child walks into a building, we say, here's your opportunity to build for your future, and the building's crumbling around them. We send them very mixed messages, and this is something that our committee is trying to address. But we also want to make sure that we have parents who are engaged in schools, and with the historic trauma that some parents still are facing with schools, I would think being engaged in a preschool setting might be a gentle way to kind of get them more engaged than just like first grade, you hit the ground running and this is what a school is. Could you maybe, because I'm going to talk to my counterpart, and she's interested in working more in Indian country. How well are your students prepared when they come? What can we do more of to make those first couple years successful so that they're excited about learning to read and to do math and engage their parents so that we retain them to graduate from high school and go on to the technical college and other colleges? Anybody can just...
At the Raymond Alpha School Board, we have a Head Start program. And our Head Start program, we have there's a lot of parent participation. Parents come into the classroom. They have like a family style dinner or lunch or breakfast with their kids. So, and they interact with the kids. There's a lot of reading. There's a one-to-one. There's a lot of reading. Then the parents are also involved in this called a parent committee where they come together. It's like a school board, almost like a school board. So the parents come together and they're all serve on a committee. They all are involved in the education of their kids. And the kids do come, they ride on the bus, they come to school, they have teachers that they work closely with, and there's a lot of interaction, a lot of reading. This is where some of our kids learn how to read, learn how to cut papers, learn how to use a pencil, learn how to socialize. So there's a lot of parents involved And even parents, we have parents that have, through the Head Start program, they've now become teachers. We have parents that have served on the parent committees that are now school board members, and I'm one of those people. I used to work on I used to belong on the committee for the Head Start program, and now I'm a school board member. So it's not only the children, but it's also the parents too. We have parents that are now certified teachers.
That's exciting. Anybody else want to?
I appreciate the discussion, especially on our campus. We inherited an old fort, and so the Indians took over the fort here over in Bismarck. But we have our buildings are 108 years old, and so in our buildings, just regularly we have sewer pipes outside and conduit for electrical outside because those were added after the buildings were built.
Oh, sure.
For the time period. So that's happening. Also is that we have Theodore Jamerson Elementary School on our campus, and they were identified by the Bureau of Indian Education as one of the 71 schools that were in need of rehabilitation, that the existing facilities had outlived their livelihood, or their for the time period. Just talk a little bit about daycare. Is that we are a North Dakota certified center, so all of our providers are required to have that certification. As a result of that certification, we're able to obtain state reimbursement to our students, to our college students. So their daycare is paid for as a student for the United Tribes Technical College. And then as far as the curriculum for the daycare students, is that teaching occurs there, and we have a established curriculum for those students or the babies that are being provided care to.
Well, we have to get the buildings right. We have to get the housing for teachers and the roads and all of that right. That's all integrated. But this is my chance to take your voice and lobby for some more. Because it's frustrating to me when I hear everybody talk about pre-K, and there's so much need in Indian education, and you're here advocating for what is traditionally in our bill. But I also know what happens before that student shows up for the first day of quote-unquote K through 12 is critically important to the student. So you wanted to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am the president of the DGSA Association, but I'm also a school board member for the Raymond Alva School Board. And for our facility, we would like to see more teacher training, more assistance in regards to consultants. Right now, we have a math consultant that comes to our school maybe once a week, and they work with the teachers in providing strategies and recommendations and guidance, I guess, in teaching our students at the lower level 3 to 5 with how to learn math. And it's all hands-on, fun and games, and that's the way the students learn. So if we could have more money in areas for consultants, for teachers, to get that training, then we can, enhance those areas, reading, math, science, even science at the lower level would be great. But sometimes we just don't have that money. And then with Head Start, there's all these restrictions like administrative costs. You can only get so much %, and you can't cram everything in there. So, the director can only do, so much with, that amount of money. So,
I'll let you have the last word before I turn it over to my colleague.
Okay. I just want to acknowledge the trauma comment, the comment that you made about the healing, and reiterate what everyone has said, that it starts at that pre-K level. And so Head Start and early learning, investing in Head Start early learning programs, not just on our tribal communities, but in our large urban areas that are serving high Native populated.
That's true, yeah.
Those students go on to public school, but we don't have Head Start early learning opportunities for those Native students who live in Denver and Phoenix and Albuquerque. You have to live outside of the area, outside of that region or that city area. And then to follow up on the teacher training, it's not just teacher training opportunities, it's providing opportunities to tribal colleges to certify language and culture teachers.
Yes.
so
Yes.
that they're going into our Head Start early learning opportunities, those programs at the lower level, at the community education-based level as well. So,
Well said.
thank you.
Mr. Amadei, do you have any thoughts?
No, Madam
or-
Chair, I'm going to, well, I mean, I thought you meant questions. I've got some thoughts. I used to. Just out of curiosity, Madam Vice President Coho, when did you say in your testimony when your gym was built?
Our gym was built in 1976.
Okay. And does the
No,
committee have,
74. It was in the early 1970s.
does the committee have any photos of any of your buildings?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
I
If-
can,
If you could provide them at some point in time, if that's okay, that'd be great.
yes, I will.
Thank
I
you.
will give you those.
I yield back.
I can show you lots of photos of schools. We have to figure this out.
I would like to see photos of the gym.
Have to figure.
Um,
We have to
As a
figure
frustrated
this out.
basketball player.
Well, Pine Hill
Here they
School,
come.
a state tournament, or having the state tournament. And if you were to come to visit our gymnasium, I think you'd be very, very surprised. I don't know if you want to even stand in there for a minute, but right now they're going to cover it. They have our facility maintenance guys are going to be covering the ceiling so that they can have this tournament.
Covering a problem does not fix a problem.
Yes.
I would like to thank you all for your testimony, of your full testimony in the book, and thank you for educating the next generation, not only for your communities, but for our country at large. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have our third panel come forward. Pretty shocking what those buildings look like, isn't it, Mark? Gerald Secchi, Tribal Chairman, Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians. Aaron Payment, Chairperson, Sault Ste. Marie, Tribe of Chippewa Indians. The Vice Chair of Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. Chairman? Zeke. Did I say it wrong? I'm sorry. And Jason Schellander. Everybody here?
Good.
Before the Red Lake Chairman starts off, I'm noticing more and more people asking for the program that you're going to be talking about in all their testimony, more funding for Tuahi and wanting to see more of it. So congratulations on all the hard work the tribe did putting that program together. Sir,
Good.
would you
Thank
read
you.
it out? Go ahead.
Start over?
Start over.
Ani.
Time's yours.
Sawi na besi men de shini kaso chuba mina kaso an migisi indu de midio bashing ma misko sai gani gindo juba. Mino am nungo ma bi jaan ja ganu ne go kicho mina be ma de si wa de shina be binani mina nda binu chi minani. Kino ma be peni men do na go chui do ka wa ha mi nik. Mi goch. My name is Daryl Siki, Senior Chairman of Red Lake Nation. Good afternoon, Chairwoman McCollum, and all our friends on the table. I'm here today to talk about 5 appropriation requests, along with other requests described in my written testimony. Funding these requests would help improve the lives of Red Lake's 12,000 plus members and the well-being of our 840,000-acre reservation in the remote northern Minnesota. First, we support advance appropriations for BIA and IHS funding. The government shutdown created cash flow crisis for Red Lake. While we decided not to lay off program staff, we had to suspend construction work on 2 fire halls, a dialysis treatment center, and an opiate treatment center. Reopening the government did not fix our cash flow crisis because it seems the federal bureaucracy has taken an awful long time to release our funds. Moreover, our analysis, the final F-2019 numbers accepted the Senate funding levels, not the House pass levels. That meant 26.5 million less for the BIA, 99 million less for IHS from what the House approved last July. So the government shutdown also caused a real loss in much needed funding because the regular appropriations process was upended. Please take this in account as you consider the FY 2020 interior request. Second, we request that you restore all funding cuts President Trump proposes for FY 2020, just like you did for his FY 2019 budget cuts. Last March, Interior Associate Deputy Secretary Chip Kaysen and then Deputy Secretary David Bernhardt attended the Tribal Interior Budget Council meeting here in D.C. I questioned both of them about the massive FY 2019 cut they requested for BIA, and I asked why BIA was being cut the most, 200 million more in fact than the National Park Service. Mr. Kaysen responded by saying that some national parks have issues with flushing toilets, leaking roofs, and running water. Tribal leaders quickly pointed out to Mr. Kaysen that many tribal homes lack flushing toilets, running water, and much worse, even a lack of electricity and heat, threatening the lives of our children. If President Trump once again seeks to fix bathrooms in parks instead of Indian homes, we will once again have to ask you to fix that bankrupt proposal. Third, we request that you fully fund, make permanent, and expand BIA's Tiwahi recidivism reduction initiatives. Tiwahi addresses many vital needs in our community. It has helped strengthen our youth suicide prevention efforts. I'm happy to report we had 0 youth suicides last year, a huge improvement from our high suicide rates in the previous years. Tiwahi has made it possible for our Children's Healing Center to implement a 24/7 youth residential treatment program for rehabilitative mental health and substance abuse services. Tiwahi also helps combat tribal member unemployment rates by providing classes, training, and workforce development program to meet the welding and certified nursing assistant workforce shortages in our region. Fourth, we request additional $20 million in FY 2020 for tribal law enforcement operations in the field. Red Lake law enforcement has waged a war on drugs. Last year, we seized over 27,904 grams of heroin and other drugs valued at over $1 million. We executed 54 search warrants and made 355 drug-related arrests. We are holding drug dealers accountable, and our crime rates are going down, but we need more resources if we are to succeed in stopping the tidal wave of drug crime. Fifth, we ask that you direct the BIA to expedite its approval and funding of lease agreements for our government buildings, that you expressly add funds for BIA leases with tribes under 25 USC 5324. Red Lake has borrowed millions of dollars to replace the BIA's dilapidated fire halls and law enforcement center that the BIA condemned but would not replace. BIA should at least pay a fair, equitable lease cost to us by requiring the BIA to quickly and full fund our proposed new lease agreements. Will be able to pay off debt we took on to build and maintain buildings the BIA failed to replace. In my hand, I have the Red Lake Treaty agreements outlining the federal government's trust responsibility to the tribe. It means you must continue to enforce these agreements because they're very binding. And it's the United States government that should take care of what they agreed upon to the tribes. Chimigwech, for allowing me to request your support for some of our most immediate needs at Red Lake as you enact our FY 2020 appropriations that directly impact my constituents. And I want to say Chimigwech to the table here.
Thank you, and you were speaking in your mother tongue, and I did not hold that time against you. But your whole testimony, Mr. Payment, is helpful if it's all in English for me.
Okay.
Aaron Payment, chairperson of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians.
I'll only say one word in Ojibwe. Anin. Thank you for hearing from me today. as elected chairperson of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe.
Team, we want to hear all of you.
Aneen, thank you for hearing from me today. As the elected chairperson of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, I'm speaking on behalf of my tribe. A little later, I will testify for the Tribal Interior Budget Committee as co-chair. I'm co-chair along with Darryl for the Midwest region, and also the National Congress of American Indians, for which I serve as the first vice president. For now, I will focus on federal recognition of tribal sovereign rights, federal treaty and trust obligations to the tribes, the need for mandatory funding, and advanced appropriations. Let me start by noting that every time I meet with representatives of the federal government, I explain the meaning of the tribal sovereignty, treaty rights, and the federal government's trust obligation to tribes. When I request funds for tribal programs and services, federal representatives, not all, often behave as if I'm begging for handouts, reparations, or some sort of public welfare for my people. They fail to recognize we prepaid in full for what we get. My tribe and 4 other 1836 tribes ceded 14 million acres to the federal government that allowed Michigan to become a state. The tribes across the country ceded 500 million acres that made America great. Unfortunately, the federal government is well aware of its treaty and trust obligations to tribes, yet often chooses to ignore these obligations. In December of 2018, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights published a federal study entitled Broken Promises, Continuing Federal Funding Shortfall for Native Americans, which was made widely available throughout the federal government. This study reported the federal government is not meeting its treaty and trust obligations to tribes. Yet the study follows up on the Quiet Crisis federal funding and unmet needs in Indian country report from way back in 2003. These and numerous studies say the same thing, that the federal government has failed to meet its treaty and trust obligations. Some enduring needs of adequate appropriations include, across the country, 25.7% of American Indian and Alaska Native people in the United States live below the poverty level, compared to 12.4% for the general population. Unemployment rates in Indian country average 22%. Basic living characteristics for Native Americans on Indian lands contribute to the Native American health crisis. For example, 32% do not have telephone services, 15% live in overcrowded homes, 11% of Native homes lack kitchen facilities, 14% have no access to electricity, and 12% lack complete plumbing. This data shows why programs like the Home Improvement Program are so important. Last year, the President proposed to eliminate the Home Improvement Program. Thank you for saving the program. I recommend that Congress continue to fully fund the Home Improvement Program. Another key program for our tribal people is the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. This program helps families keep their homes adequately heated. We've had a record cold in the Midwest this year and snow. I believe that this program has kept tribal elders and some of our tribal children from freezing to death. I urge Congress to fully fund LIHEAP. Our Head Start program is essential to meeting the early education needs of tribal children. Our Head Start program has not had a base funding increase for 17 years. I strongly recommend base funding increases for both Head Start and Early Head Start, as well as funding increases for facilities maintenance. Our tribal court program, an integral component of our tribe's sovereignty, is significantly underfunded as well. In fact, the federal government provides 3.7% of the base funding needed to operate a tribal court capable of meeting our tribe's service population and jurisdictional needs. We recommend Congress to fully fund tribal courts' base funding levels to meet the budget model provided by the BIA. I would be remiss if I didn't reinforce our Chippewa-Ottawa Resource Authority $500,000 litigation support request as the 1836 treaty tribes approach our treaty consent decree negotiations. You are our trustee. You are a party to this decree. It is your duty to fund the litigation support for litigation for which the federal government is a party. We have tried to get the Department of Interior to request these funds, but the Trump administration simply refuses. I'm advised that the President proposes and Congress disposes, so I'm asking you to propose and dispose, well, no, not dispose once you propose it, but to propose your own budget if the Interior and Trump administration will not, I'm asking you to. In conclusion, the lack of adequate funding limits our tribal governments can provide for their people and prevents tribes from lifting themselves from a state of dependence to self-determination, self-governance, self-sufficiency, and empowerment. To advance this goal, I urge and advance advance appropriations for federal programs and services impacting tribes. According to a September 2018 GAO report, it's GAO 18652, it identifies the challenges of IHS health delivery for American Indian Alaska Natives and how advance appropriations can fix this. Tribes are already faced with critically underfunded health general welfare programs. And finally, in addition to my request that you institute advanced appropriations on federal funding services impacting tribes, I request you appropriate funds for those programs and services specifically recommended by intertribal organizations like the National Congress of American Indians, National Indian Health Board, and National Indian Housing Council, and NIEA. And then I did bring, and I'm not going to go over it, but I did bring copies of advanced appropriation detailed information for you. Okay, thank you.
We'll enter that for the record, and while we're without any objections, and Chairman, would you like your remarks, which were not part of the prepared marks, would you like those to be officially entered into the record, if you can give me the written? Any objections? Nope. So moved. Thank you. So, Mr. Taken Alive, good to have you here. You're next. Vice Chairman of Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, where many of us visited back a while ago. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Ira Taken Alive, and I serve as the Vice Chairman of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe of North and South Dakota. I bring glad tidings from the over 16,000 enrolled Standing Rock tribal members, including those who are serving in the United States military here and around the world. Madam Chair, it is wonderful to see you again. As you had mentioned, you had visited Standing Rock back in 2011 with Congressman Cole and as well as then Congressman Rick Berg. You probably don't recognize me because I had blacker hair then, but
my hair was darker too, but we're not going to talk about that.
That was a remarkable and memorable day for us at Standing Rock because we had the opportunity to showcase our community development efforts, share our vision, and to highlight the critical needs that we have. As you had witnessed at Standing Rock Reservation is a very beautiful place. The hills, river valleys, sunrises, and sunsets can take your breath away. And of course, the people are beautiful as well. While you were there, you were able to see not only the beauty, but also the significant challenges faced by our communities. An unemployment rate above 50%, a poverty rate that is 3 times that of the national rate, and the 6th and 7th poorest counties in the entire nation. Add to these figures, Standing Rock has a median age of 26.9 years old. With such a young median age, our population is projected to double within the next decade. And certainly as a tribal leader, tribal elected official, this is cause for alarm because we currently struggle to provide basic services with our government services. I share this to underscore the importance of funding for the BIA, the IHS, and the BIE at Standing Rock. While we have very dedicated BIA staff, caring IHS providers, and inspiring BIA educators at Standing Rock, there's only so much that can be accomplished with limited funding, especially with funding that is subject to a federal government shutdown. As an example of how every little bit helps when it comes to the funding of BIA, IHS, and BIE, like other communities across the Midwest, Standing Rock is battling the scourge of methamphetamine and opioid abuse. To help tackle the problem, the recently appointed BIA Office of Justice Services Chief of Police and his crew at Standing Rock focused on roadway traffic policing over a 3-month period from October 2018 to the middle of January, this past January. In that operation, they were able to net over 200 drug-related arrests, seize large amounts of drugs, and seize over $100,000 in cash from these arrests. And due to an inadequate number of law enforcement officer positions at Standing Rock to patrol our 2.2 million acre reservation over the years, there is a belief, especially among non-natives, that there is lawlessness at Standing Rock and that drug trafficking can go unabated. Through the hard work and dedication of our law enforcement and the addition of several more officers over the past several months, drug traffickers now know to steer clear of Standing Rock. This addition of several officer positions proves that every little bit helps. As another example, Madam Chair, as you may know, Standing Rock made national news several years ago due to a heartbreaking outbreak of youth suicides and suicide attempts. I had served as director of the Standing Rock Wellness Program in 2015 during such an outbreak. Thankfully, the IHS National Office was able to provide emergency funding to Standing Rock to respond to the crisis and to provide additional supports. There's nothing more gut-wrenching than to lose our young people to suicide. This is why creating a new initiative like the Mental Health Substance Abuse Pilot Program, which hopefully will be proposed for fiscal year 2020, that'll be based on the Special Diabetes Program for Indians, is such a great idea. A pilot program of dedicated, targeted funds to address these issues will place tribes in the driver's seat before these issues become a crisis. As has been quipped many times over many years at Standing Rock, it is not a coincidence that our greatest challenges and greatest needs are what are promised in our treaties with the United States. Education, healthcare, infrastructure, and law enforcement support are critical to a vibrant economy, trained workforce, and of course, a healthy citizenry. Madam Chair, as evidenced by the testimony provided yesterday and today by other elected tribal officials, our stories of partnership with the federal government to address our communities' challenges and needs are based on the obligations outlined in our respective treaties with the United States. May the record reflect that they are not handouts. May the record reflect, nor are they welfare benefits. And may the record also reflect that they are not reparations. At Standing Rock, our 1851 and 1868 treaties are considered wakam, or sacred, because they were forged in good faith, peace, and with a belief in our future generations. Whether it's 1851, 1868, or 2020, our treaties encompass all that is sacred to us: our lands, our water, our health care, our safety, and the desire for a good life for future generations. Madam Chair, I'm very grateful for having had this opportunity to serve as a witness today. Wopila tanka iche chapelo. Please know that you and your colleagues have an open invitation to visit Standing Rock again, and by then, hopefully our 8-foot snowdrifts will have been melted. I conclude my remarks.
I don't want them to melt too fast. They come my way eventually. We have the vice chairman of La Courte. So is it, I didn't take.
Le Coudray.
Le Coudray.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot better when you say it. Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. Welcome, vice chairman.
Bonjour, Niji Bamajazi Jig Oma, Nin Samani Du Nuden Indigenous Cause Biju and Du Dame, Odawazagai Gunning and Dunjiba. First of all, I want to acknowledge the Madam Chair McCollum and the members of this committee for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Lakudere and other tribes in this country. Miigwech to this committee for its substantial efforts to protect the interests of LCO, or Lakudere, in the FY19 Interior Appropriations and for once again rejecting the President's inadequate budget request for tribal programs. Chronic underfunding of tribal programs and treaty obligations has taken a toll on our tribe. We urge Congress to provide advance appropriations for BIA and IHS so their crucial programs are not impacted by government shutdowns or delays in funding. So you have my testimony. It's for the record. I'd like to go off and just speak personally as a beneficiary of our treaties that we have signed with the United States. We have, and for Lakudere, we have significant treaties signed in 1837, 1842, and 1854, of which I'm a beneficiary of. I'm also a beneficiary of all of the leadership that has come before you to request the necessary funding in order to run our programs. One of the huge issues that we have in Indian country is the opioid epidemic. The opioid epidemic is ravaging Indian communities, as you have heard. But the true center of it all is on the historical trauma that impacts tribal communities and this country. I spent the first day I arrived here in Washington, D.C., I spent 6 hours in our museum, the National Museum of the American Indian, and I spent another 4 hours in the Museum of the African American Culture and Museum. And it reminded me of the of the tragedies that have happened in this country, and reminded me of the trust obligation that that the United States has with tribes. So with that, trauma-informed care is needed, and so a request for increased funding for behavioral health to implement preventative measures to battle addiction, depression, suicide, diabetes, and heart disease. Our children need those necessary programs in order to fulfill their purpose in life. We do need facilities for recovery as well. And so that's why the request for necessary increased funding for our Indian Child Welfare Act, which provides child protective services, neonatal services, foster care, are crucial for our community. In addition to that, the Bureau of Indian Education is also in dire need of an increase of funding, especially for our ISEP formula, which was mentioned in the prior testimony. Our FACE program, also the construction costs and contract support is desperately needed. We need those programs and the necessary funding in order to keep our teachers at a competitive wage, because we lose them to public schools. And so with that, more programs can also be implemented. Culture, in our community, culture-based programming is what's paramount for us, as what has kept us alive from the beginning. Through everything that tribal people have endured, our culture and our language has been there for us and has kept us alive and kept us standing upright. So with that, I would also request that, in addition to our educational obligations, that we include roads and housing improvement programs. The Tawahi Initiative, which includes tribal courts and job placement and training. Also, additional to that is the Wildlife and Parks for more funding for water quality initiatives and law enforcement and biological services, so that we can determine what a safe harvest level is for our people in our communities. In addition to that, we go back to education with Title III funding, which is Part A and Part F, which is due to sunset in 2020. We just ask that not be done, and that funding for charter schools be directly funded as well. Also, I'd also ask for this committee to support Abigail Ekahawk in her efforts to create additional mechanisms to track missing and murdering Indigenous women across this country. As I mentioned before, our culture is the cure for many of our social ills, but we strive on our partners in our treaties respecting their responsibility and honoring their part as well. So I close with this comment and this statement from Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black. Great nations like great men should keep their word. But I only want to add that great nations like great men and women should keep their word as well. And that's a testament to all the women that have been recently elected to Congress. We acknowledge them, and we say miigwech to the two ladies, Sharice Davids and to Deb Holland, for their recent appointments. Miigwech Pizendawieg.
Thank you. Mr. Amade?
I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you for mentioning, yesterday testimony, I mentioned that Deb and Congresswoman Holland and Congressman woman Davis, I was talking to them on the floor after I left in between the testimony yesterday. They have access to everything. They've been tuning in on and off in their offices in between their committee assignments. And I couldn't be more excited. I couldn't be happier than to have their voices at the table. And Ms. Holland's role as the new co-chair of the Native American Caucus, as I stepped aside for that great honor of having her have that, is just absolutely amazing. So their voices are going to be very involved as we put this together, so thank you. And Chairman, Mr. Trump's budget when it comes to Indian Affairs appropriations is not popular with this committee. And so you have, last time, and unless he, gives us an A-plus budget this time for tribal affairs, you will see the House step forward and and do everything that we can to do right by our Native American brothers and sisters. I'd like to take an opportunity with you gentlemen here. As I was reading through all the testimony, the Tawahi program came up a lot, which I got to know well when visiting the chairman up at Red Lake. And it deals with, an integration of many things. And other tribes are saying they would like to have a pilot or they'd like to do something similar. And for me, the core of it was children. Because of the out-of-home placements that the chairman had shared with us, it was heartbreaking. And all of you have brought up children in different ways, whether it's Child Protective Services or whatever. Just for a second, just focus on the most vulnerable among us, who are sometimes our elders, but quite often our children. What are the one or two things that if you think we got right in this as we put this through, could really be impactful for the next generation? We have to work on the generations here and their healing and their job opportunities, but all of us want to get it right for the next generation. Any top priorities within the child protection area?
If I may, just for a minute, just to kind of elaborate on our Child Protective Services, which is within our Indian Child Welfare Department. So our department is in dire need. Our department is understaffed, and we have just so much need there. So, so with an increased funding amount, we can get a larger staff. We can also increase the number of the capacity for foster care and other things, so we don't have to. So our children can be surrounded by relatives and family, that they don't have to be, separated from them or anything like that, because that's what is desperately, right. It increases to that. It just adds to the trauma that's already there.
Just real quickly, I had the pleasure of testifying on Heidi Heikamp's bill for the Child Commission, and so I would say that getting that fully functioning and up and running and accountable back to you to give reports across the spectrum. The challenge for Indian children is that our funding is piecemealed across budgets. And so the intent of the Child Commission was to get a good picture of the state of Indian affairs as it relates to our kids, our future generation. So I'd say bringing that back and asking for accountability and reports back from that committee.
Is this on? Yep. My answer to that is, I know you talked about a Tawahi initiative. The Tawahi initiative, we have courts, but what helps for the Tawahi is the parents. They get their kids back. They get the families get back together after they lost their children. But what really helps is to continue to fund these programs that helps our Native children. Because the other thing is the court system. We need immediate family to be considered to take the kids, when they take the kids away from them, the grandparents, the immediate family should get them instead of sending them out to non-Native families for the kids, because our kids are very important in our nation, our Indian country, because they're our next generation, and someday they'll be sitting here talking to your replacements or whoever comes there. And the education is very important, to educate our youths, to understand, and also the culture we have. They got to understand our culture. They got to speak our language and all that, because everything's important on this table here for our families, all the way to older elders, women, men, the younger generation that's coming. All these initiatives that we need, we got to protect our children. Children are very important to everyone.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. At Standing Rock, we have the benefit of having the state border of North Dakota and South Dakota straddle our reservation. And there is a stark difference in the access to quality health care that the expansion of the Medicare program has had. For instance, in North Dakota, where the state has elected to expand Medicaid, you see children having greater access to basic services such as dental care, and including mental health care. So, and South Dakota has yet to embrace that, and there is definitely a difference. So certainly we have IHS to provide healthcare services on the reservation, but to have that extra resource for our families and for our children to tap into certainly enhances that care.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your thoughtful testimony. Which, Mr. Amade, would you like to introduce the next set, and I'll help you out. It's Anishinaabe.
Well, with that offer, Madam Chair, I would respectfully decline because I don't want these people to hate me
No, they
for
won't.
not doing the job of that.
They will not hate you. I used to go fishing around Fort Peck. So the next panel, you can do it.
Yeah, this looks pretty good.
Go ahead.
For the next panel, Tribal Government and Human Resources, Mr. Chairman Azure. I'm Amadeli too, so come on up. Chief William Harris, I like the last three. Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Luke Duncan and Secretary Casey Mitchell. Madam Chair, I would like to, since you asked me to do this, I would like to yield back to you to correctly pronounce the names of the tribes, please, since you're the leader of the band here. Thank you, and I yield back.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. We'll start the clock at 5 minutes, and then as I know some of you came in afterwards. When it goes to yellow, it's about a minute left, and we'd ask you to be prepared to conclude your remarks. Welcome, and we'll start out with the chairman of the Anishinaabe Sioux Tribes of the Fort Peck Reservation.
Assiniboine Sioux Tribes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right, and I'm wrong. Better get the contacts fixed.
Thank you very much. I am Floyd Azure, Chairman of the Assiniboine and Sioux Tribes of the Fort Peck Reservation. I would like to thank the subcommittee for the opportunity to present this testimony. I grew up on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. I started my business. I raised my family on the Fort Peck Reservation. I love my home. I love my people who have entrusted me with their future. There's no place I would choose to live than the land my ancestors preserved for us. While my people are facing challenges that for many communities are just abstract news stories. A father is found overdosed. A child was taken from her parents. A mother commits suicide. But in my community, these are not abstract news stories. Each of these tragedies is personal to me because I grew up with these people and their families, and yes, because they trust me with their futures. In my house, it is not only I who bears the burden of these tragedies. My wife, Jerry, has been a kindergarten teacher in the popular school for almost 30 years now. She is one of the many unsung heroes throughout Indian country who is making sure that no matter what is happening in a child's home life, when he or she comes to school, they are safe. Because of Jerry and people like her, I think Indian country has a lot to celebrate. At Fort Peck, like many tribal communities across the plains, we are celebrating our basketball teams. I am so proud of our popular Indians who are in the 2019 Northern B Division champions. The last time this happened was 35 years ago.
35
Well,
years
last
ago.
night, they began their successful bid for the state championship. They won their first game.
And you're here.
It's great. And I can say as a politician, it is quite a sacrifice to be here with you
Yeah.
this week and not home with this team cheering them on. I got a cousin that's on the team, a young cousin who's playing, so I cheer him on. This is a school that 10 years ago we had a CED identified suicide cluster. 5 of our children in middle school committed suicide and 20 more 7th and 8th graders tried. The children who are playing in a state basketball tournament this week are the peers of the children who took their lives. Notwithstanding the pain and grief that they had seen and experienced in their young lives, they made a different choice. They chose to work hard and to play a sport for the joy and for the love of our community. Whatever made these children get up and keep going to school, making the grades and going to practice, it is what we need more of. I wish I could say that this week I will go home and it will be a Hollywood movie and all will be right, but that will not be the case. Our children will go home to a community that is overrun with drugs. This last summer we had a rash of heroin overdoses, including 2 fatal overdoses in 1 month. Every month a child is born testing positive for meth or some other drug. We have entire families that are using, from grandmothers to grandchildren. This level of social dysfunction is no doubt the cause of the high suicide rate in our communities. I wish I could say that this plague has passed over Fort Peck, and we found that the magic bullet to stop this tragedy. But just last summer, Michael Lee, a 13-year-old boy, took his life. This baby really had a family that loved him. He played sports, and he was determined to go to college. In many people's minds, he had so much promise, but something happened, and we lost this child. Who knows what we as a tribe lost because this young man lost hope and took his own life. I can only tell you that it is time that we stop burying our children and start working together to combat this tragedy. We would urge the subcommittee to continue emphasize the need for additional mental health and substance abuse treatment. In particular, we support the effort to develop a special behavioral pilot program to combat behavioral mental health issues in a holistic and culturally appropriate way. If Poplar basketball team's success this year teaches us anything, is that our children are resilient. We cannot give up on them. We need to have hope, and we need to fund the programs that will give them the tools they need to live a healthy lifestyle. I want to thank the committee for the time today. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Sir, we have your full testimony. That is different than what I have in my book. Could I please have it for the official record?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very, very eloquent. Without any objection, Mr. Joyce?
None whatsoever.
So moved. Mr. Harris?
Good to see you again. It's good to be before this committee. Thank you, Chairman McCollum, Ranking Member Joyce, and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to testify on critical funding needs for American Indian and Alaska Native programs under your jurisdiction. The people of the Catawba Indian Nation, thank you for your hard work on behalf of Indian Country and for inviting tribal leaders to submit witness testimony on their community's behalf. My name is William Harris. I am the chief of the Catawba Nation, the only federally recognized tribe in the state of South Carolina. And like our traditional pottery, the Catawba have been created from southern soil to be shaped and fired over time by unimaginable hardships, and now stand tall as a living testament to our ancestors and to my nation and the land we call home. To advance the socio-economic development and well-being of Catawba and other communities, I offer the following budget recommendations for the fiscal year 2020. Increased support for non-gaming tribes. As a sovereign nation and industrious people, we are committed to achieving economic self-sufficiency. For the Catawba Nation, this goal is immeasurably complicated by the terms of our 1993 Settlement Act with the state that inhibits meaningful tribal economic development. For example, our tribe is currently prohibited from establishing gaming operations on tribal lands under the, but we were allowed to operate 2 bingo halls, neither of which ever turned out a marginal profit due to the fact that the state was taking 10% straight off the top. So it is our hope to come back to Congress and ask for amendments to our settlement agreement that will restore some of our lost sovereignty and free up social potential. In the interim, we continue to explore innovative avenues for economic growth. We urge Congress to invest in economic development programs for non-gaming tribes to further the federal government's policy of promoting tribal self-determination and economic self-sufficiency. Expanded access to investment opportunities in Indian Country. Given adequate support and the appropriate resources, the majority of tribes would likely become, assuming they are not already, significant contributors to their local and regional communities. Tribes are economic engines of the tourism industry, renewable energies, and small business development, commercial services, among many others. However, limited access to capital and investment financing remain substantial barriers in Indian Country. We struggle with uniquely burdensome federal regulations, poor infrastructure, and other issues that limit their economies from flourishing. It is important to create avenues for investment funds, financial resources, and business models that are mutually advantageous to the tribes and potential partners for economic advancement, stability, and diversification. We encourage Congress to provide increased support for investment opportunities in Indian Country for the 2020 fiscal budget. Connect tribal communities to the local and regional economy, increased BIA roads construction and maintenance funding. Adequate and well-maintained roads are essential to connecting tribal members, businesses, and partners with economic opportunity both on and off the reservation. The quality of road work is often used to assess local development and the capacity for a region to support economic development. If we were to evaluate the roads on our reservation as well as across Indian Country, many investors would find the infrastructure conditions to pose a business risk. Unsafe and undeveloped roadways discourage investors from partnering with tribal communities. They also contribute to the lost employment opportunities because companies hesitate to operate businesses in an area that lack the necessary infrastructure to efficiently move people and products between different markets. Funding for the BIA's roads maintenance project has been level funded at about $30 million for several fiscal years. Despite the accumulation of over $490 million in backlog needs, our reservation, for example, has 33 miles of roads included on the BIA roads inventory. Maintaining these roads cost is $215,000 annually. We receive $25,000. Thank you. In federal assistance. I got that also. As a small non-gaming tribal community, we need to be able to rely on our roads for economic growth. We urge Congress to provide $50 million for the BIA road maintenance program to protect health, safety, and welfare of Indian Country. Provide advance appropriations for the Indian Health Services. The United States has a trust responsibility to provide for Indian health care, yet decades of underfunding and under-resourcing the IHS has contributed to severe health care crisis across Indian Country. Full advance appropriations of the IHS could promote greater stability in services, medical personnel recruitment, and retention among the facilities. It would also provide IHS with the ability to address the Veterans Affairs Administration. So I encourage Congress to provide advance appropriations for the IHS in the 2020. But thank you for the opportunity of being here today.
Thank you. Luke Duncan, Chairman of the Ute Indian Tribe. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Luke Duncan. I'm the chairman of the Ute Indian Business Committee in northeastern Utah, Ute Indian Tribe. And I thank you all for the opportunity on behalf of my people, the Ute people. Thank you. And we ask for your attention to 4 issues that fall under the area of tribal government and human services today. These are education, housing, justice services, energy, development. Out of these areas, tribal government and human services are directly impacted by your funding decisions. Most important, the subcommittee must start a new effort to prioritize and fund Indian education through tribally run schools. We ask that you remove the moratorium on Bureau of Indian Education funding for new schools and create a new source of funding for tribally run schools. This funding is needed to fulfill the United States Treaty and trust responsibility for the education of our youth. Currently, 2% of our tribal youth go to public or state public schools, and only 8% go to BIE schools, which are boarding schools. No matter what school they go to, 100% of our youth are taught according to federal and state standards. We on the reservation, we started a charter school, and we all know that the funding goes directly to the states from BIE. And from there, there's a head count of our native students. And the funding all goes to there. And we've witnessed on our reservation where a lot of our children, after head count is taken, they are moved away from the majority of students. They end up in our charter school that we established on the reservation. And they end up there. It's a self-paced school. And our school on the reservation is not just for tribal members. There's non-tribal members there as well that graduate with our students. And like I always say, I'm proud to say, we are the warriors. And when they graduate with us, the non-natives, they are warriors too when they leave our school. And I'm glad to say that just last weekend, our team, our ladies, girls team, won state. And very proud of them. But I think it's very important. Almost all our children go to state schools and are taught federal and state standards. These state schools are modern-day boarding schools to us. This unlawful delegation of federal treaty and trust responsibility to the states enriches state school budgets, as I mentioned. The states even keep the funding after our children are removed and sent home for whatever reasons, behavior problems, whatever they come up with, and they are removed. Children are constantly called in with their parents and try to address the issue, and in the end, they end up leaving. Aside from BIE's limited budget, all federal funding for the education of tribal youth goes to states. As I mentioned, the federal government must stop funding states to educate our youth according to state standards. It's very important now to our people, and I live on the reservation, and we do not want them to get further away from the culture as it did in the boarding school era. We want them to know who they are. We've lost enough of our children that way. Identity is lost, and we don't want to do that anymore. So we're asking today that the funding be increased for tribally owned schools. And also with that, I'd like to say that, yes, they could be funded through the BIE and for tribal schools and only. Also, the tribe, we had a justice center that was outdated and condemned more or less about 10 years ago. The tribe put money into a new center, almost $36 million of our own funds to build one, and it was built. And it sits on the reservation now, and you know, the BIA is more or less controlling that now because we don't have the funding to run that, enough funding. So we'd like to ask for additional funding to help us with that. And also, one issue I'd like to bring up is housing. As we all know, you know, we have housing problems on the reservations, and we have 3 or 4 generations under one roof. And we'd like to see that increase to where our homes can be built there for our people. And finally, we'd like to ask your support for Indian energy development on the reservations. We are an energy tribe, and we asked you to protect funding for the Department of Energy's Tribal Energy Loan Guarantee Program. This is the only federal program that helps tribes access capital for commercial scale energy products. Despite this energy dominance agenda, the President has eliminated this program, or trying to, and we ask you to support us and keep that there, if you would. I'd like to say at this time, thank you very much for allowing me to testify in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of this subcommittee. I am Casey Mitchell, Secretary of the Nez Perce Tribal Executive Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of the Nimiipuu people. I want to begin my remarks by acknowledging the invaluable work of this subcommittee. I express our deep gratitude for your efforts to advocate for increased appropriations for many years on a bipartisan basis to the multitude of programs in your jurisdiction which tribal nations administer and benefit from. Funding increases to tribal programs include in the final fiscal year 2019 Consolidated Appropriations Act build on increases you have helped secure for Indian country in fiscal years 2017, 2018. Katsiaoya, thank you. I also want to add the voice of the Nez Perce tribe to those of other tribal leaders who have expressed support for continuing to increase funding in fiscal year 2020 for tribal programs at BIA, IHS, EPA, and Fish and Wildlife. Also, your work, Madam Chair, with others to provide advanced appropriations for BIA and IHS, urging you to continue to fund programs in the Interior and Environment Bill at current levels that we anticipate the administration's budget request will propose to eliminate. Continue to fully fund contract support costs, keeping funding for the special diabetes program for Indians mandatory rather than discretionary, and keeping harmful riders out of appropriations bills. The Nez Perce Tribe does a tremendous amount of work administering programs of the BIA and IHS and EPA through 638 programs and direct services. I would like to briefly describe some of these programs and interactions with agencies under this committee's jurisdiction. Law enforcement and social services are two of the larger departments of the tribe. However, funding for these programs is lacking. Currently, the tribe has substantially subsidized our law enforcement program to ensure services are provided throughout the reservation. More monies are needed in these areas. Much of my work for the tribe has been in fisheries resource management. BIA Natural Resource Tribal Priority Allocations and Endangered Species Program funding has been key for our work related to Chinook salmon and steelhead. The BIA Rights Protection Implementation Account supports our exercise of treaty-reserved off-reservation hunting, fishing, gathering, and our monitoring of fish harvests. In addition to BIA programs, the tribe operates a healthcare clinic on the reservation in Lapwai and a satellite facility in Kamiai that provides services for over 4,000 patients. This computes to over 40,000 medical provider visits. The tribe's funding through EPA comes from a variety of programs. A number of these programs have been funded at the same levels for several years, and the tribe recommends increases to them in fiscal year 2020. The Nimipu are river and salmon people. Since time immemorial, we have fished the Columbia and Snake rivers. The tribe requests that this subcommittee continue to fund EPA's Columbia River Basin Restoration Program. We recommend no less than $1 million provided in fiscal year 2019 be appropriated in fiscal year 2020. We hope, however, that number can be substantially increased. We also work with Fish and Wildlife Service to operate the Kuski National Fish Hatchery and to co-manage Dorshak National Fish Hatchery. Also, the State and Tribal Wildlife Grants Program has enabled the tribe to monitor gray wolves, conduct research on bighorn sheep and condor habitat, and conserve rare plants. It is important that the tribal share of these competitive grants be increased. The Nez Perce Tribe Reservation encompasses 11 national forests. We work with both the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management on the management of these treaty-reserved resources, such as bighorn sheep within the tribe's aboriginal territories on these lands. As you can see, the work of the Nez Perce Tribe with these agencies benefits 18,000 tribal and non-tribal citizens who reside within the Nez Perce Reservation. These resources, such as air, land, the water, the four-legged and the winged creatures, are sacred. The U.S. has a trust obligation to protect and preserve these through adequate funding. In my language, Nimipu Timpt, I just want to say Makis Katsiaya, thanks a lot. And I want to refer back to a statement you made, Madam Chair, as all of us want to get it right for the next generation. I believe we all sitting in these seats and at this table are here because we want to be, and that people believe in us to make that choice for them. Not only our people, but all the programs and services that this subcommittee does as well. There was mentioned before that, soon we will be the ancestors, and is our future children going to say that our ancestors made the good choice for me, like our ancestors made good choices for us to be here today. So thank you, Madam Chair, and Katsiaya.
Yeah. Mr. Joyce?
Thank you all for being here, and I certainly appreciate your astute leadership on behalf of your tribes, and we both realize the importance of making sure that we try to get the funding to meet your needs. So I don't have any questions. I just want to thank everyone for being here.
Thank you. I do have a question. In your testimony, you talk about rural water. which is in another committee which I managed to get myself on, and all of Indian country. I mean, if we looked at your total budget, it comes out of so many different lines. Would you take a moment and kind of elaborate a little more on your rural water comments that are in your testimony, so it's on the record publicly?
Rural water program is awesome.
The mic.
Oh, sorry. Our rural water project is awesome. We've just about completed it. There's about 2 or 3 years left in it. We've been working very hard, very diligently on it. We service everyone in northeastern Montana, probably from Glasgow, Montana, all the way to the North Dakota-Montana border, also from the Missouri River north to the Canadian border. It's not only on our reservation, we service outside communities also, like Culbertson, Glasgow, Nashua, and it has provided the Fort Peck tribes with excellent water, because prior to that our water was contaminated by the oil industry, and that was in our groundwater. We had a dam put on our Poplar River, which is one of the main rivers that run from Canada to Poplar, right by Poplar, and that there has now got a coal-fired power plant on it, which was built back in the 80s, and it slows the water down considerably. We have the Milk River that runs on the west side of our reservation, which is going to be crossed shortly here if it goes through the KXL pipeline, which will also cross the Missouri River, which is where we get our water right now. We are adamantly opposing that. We want them to redirect it, and if that goes, we'll have no more freshwater sources. That there, oil does not float. It sinks. We have no idea how they'd clean it up. It not only would affect our drinking water for all those 30,000 plus people that we supply water to right now, but it would also affect the irrigation systems that we have, not only that's on our reservation, but south of the Missouri River, on the other side, off the reservation. Those people also irrigate, and it will also harm them. I am adamant about this. I always feel that we're always overlooked. We've always been like that. We've never ever been consulted on it. It came forward later. We've had numerous visits with KXL, TransCanada. They have been basically given us a commercial, is what I call it, of how they're going to do this and what they're going to do. Not really addressing our needs or our requests. We've requested numerous times to have information from them on how they came about with the science backing them on the Missouri River, because we disagree with it, because the river that they're using is nothing like the Missouri River, and the place that they put it is nothing like where they had any other pipeline going through. So that is where we're at right now, and that there is one thing that I think that we should take another look at.
Well, one of the reasons why I asked is my grandfather was from the Sydney Fairview area, spent a lot of time up and around there, and I know how special the water is and the fish that we pulled out of there.
Oh, yeah.
I thank you for your comments. It's very dear to my heart, where the water that you're talking about.
Thank you.
The other question I have, you mentioned the number of children that are being tested positive for drugs basically upon delivery. Is there anything that the Bureau is doing with identifying early interventions, because there can be interventions to help these children as they develop or work with family on that? When, I mean, they're tested, they know when they're born. Is there any follow-up that the Bureau is offering the tribe?
No. We are working on something right now where we can try and keep that family together. And I want to thank you for the expanded Medicaid and Medicare. It's been an absolute help on our reservation, and through that we have identified a rehab facility in Seattle, Washington. Well, they will take the whole family and help them rehabilitate themselves with that, including they'll put the child back with the family and the mother, and they'll take the whole family. And that there, I believe, is for a year. But we would have never, ever been able to do that without the funds we get from the Medicaid or Medicare third-party billing expansion. That there has been awesome for the Fort Peck tribes. I got individuals in my administration, in my offices, that have basically would have been considered disabled if they weren't able to take advantage of that and go and get, one of them had 2 knee replacements, one of them had 1 knee replacement. And right now they're back at work, which is great, not only for us, but for the state of Montana, because the disability payments come out of the state of Montana. Okay. So I want to thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Could you give me an example or two, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Harris, you both mentioned environmental protections in that. We've heard a little bit about the tribes, the tribal priority allocation, and that there's not enough dollars to go around. What are some of the things that you would do if you had increased funding for some of the environmental work that you would like to do? Anybody who'd like to comment on that? I'd like to, some things that would be kind of targeted, with more dollars for environmental intervention.
I know for Catawba, and I'll only speak for Catawba, currently right now our water is being on our reservation from the local city. And what we had was an episode that happened. It took us about 1.5 years to get rectified. The water they were putting through their system was not meeting our standards, which is, we can do equal to or better than. And so we spent a lot of dollars trying to get that water level to acceptability. And with that, we weren't able to do that. So what we're looking at now is trying to find fresh water wells on our reservation that will allow us to test those sites and see if we can get that water and be self-sufficient and get it away from the city.
Anybody else on any environmental projects?
For the Nez Perce tribe, we, the funding, it comes from a variety of programs, the Clean Water Act, Indian General Assistance Program, Tribal Brownfield Program, Underground Storage, Clean Air Act, Regentained Pesticides, Circuit Rider Program, as well as others. These programs have helped the Nez Perce tribe tremendously in our environmental protection. For one is for us, it would be also the water system. There has been some water quality standards that have been suggested to our area that are well below what our fish consumption rate may be for tribes. So, some of them water quality standards that have been suggested that are just not adequate for what the tribe's standards are.
Anything else you'd like to add in environmental?
Yes. Right now, our water system on the reservation, it's not adequate. And your question, yes, we would increase our staff to make sure that everything is in place. We're kind of getting to that point where we're looking at an outdated water system for our people, and that serves all of the reservation and non-members as well. So that is what we do. And also in the area of air, EPA air, right now, we're an oil and energy tribe, and we've been having problems with the ozone layer, and we do have departments that are dealing with that. But we've been meeting with the EPA and trying to work out something with the EPA, and they promised us, with the FIP program, and to get us on a national FIP. But it's been a drag. It's time consuming. So we've met with them again here today, And, you know, hopefully we'll get that in place to get something in place for us. And our tribe, because we're a non-gaming tribe, Utah, will never be that. But, you know, our existence is on oil and gas. We've been in oil and gas for 70 years now, and that's what we would do. We'd add additional staff for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, and I'll let Ms. Pingree call up the next panel, and you're gonna be, I have to leave, and I just want to thank everybody for their participation. This was amazing, and you've helped us hone in our budget better. Thank you.
It's our last panel.
Yeah, me and Chris later today. So, okay, take Chris, I'm Raleigh. We'll see you later. Okay.
69 or 70 or something like that.
Great, very nice to have you all here. I'm Shelley Pingree, I represent Maine. So we've had a visit from one of our tribes earlier today, and we're very happy to have all of you here today. And let's start with Dr. Payman.
I want to thank the committee again for holding this hearing for our tribal witnesses. Again, my name is Aaron Payman. I testified a little bit earlier. In addition to serving as chairperson of my tribe, again, I serve as the Midwest Region co-chair for Tribal Interior Budget Committee and first vice president for the National Congress of American Indians. As background, TIBIC provides a forum for the BIA budget government-to-government consultation with statutory authority that originated in the Indian Self-Determination and Education Act. Today I will talk about the ways the subcommittee could incorporate the information from the BIA budget formulation process into your work. The budget formulation and consultation process is critical to identifying potential efficiencies while at the same time ensuring I'm not starting over. While at the same time ensuring the federal government upholds its solemn treaty and trust obligations to Indian country. As part of the FY 2020 budget consultation process, tribes from each of the BIA regions across the country completed a survey to outline which 10 budget line items they would prefer to provide increased funding to and why. The results of this process showed that the BIA Social Services, ICWA, tribal courts, aid to tribal governments, scholarships and education, criminal investigations and policy, road maintenance, a housing and home improvement program, Johnson O'Malley, detentions and corrections, and welfare assistance made up the top 11. This oral testimony will address some of these issues, but not all, but it is in my written testimony. In Human Services, the Social Services Program provides the only BIA and tribal-specific funding available to child protective services for both Indian children and adults in Indian country. Native American families are exposed to domestic violence and child endangerment situations at a higher rate than in non-Native communities. These disparities are related to problems of poverty, violence, and substance and child abuse. In 3 of the past 5 years of budget formulation, tribes have identified social services as the top program area in BIA needing increases. The Social Services Program is drastically underfunded, and tribal programs, families, and children suffer as a result. Another important human services program is ICWA funding, which is the foundation of most tribal child welfare programs. In order for Native children and families to receive the best possible services in tribal and state systems and allow tribes to assist state agencies and courts, adequate funding must be provided to tribal governments to support their child welfare programs. We recommend that ICWA on and near reservation program appropriations receive at least $20 million and an additional $5 million for the off-reservation ICWA implementation, which has never been funded. The last program I'll address is the Welfare Assistance line item, which provides 5 important forms of funding to American Indian Alaska Native families: general assistance, child assistance, non-medical institution or custodial care of adults, burial assistance, and emergency assistance. Child welfare programs and social services agencies need to have these resources necessary to support families in times of crisis and uncertainty. In our written testimony, we have included much more detail. I also want to emphasize that it is so important that the BIA and IHS receive advanced appropriations to provide budget certainty. We appreciate the work of this committee, and I want to thank you for protecting our treaty and trust obligations in the federal appropriations process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll go ahead with Ms. Martin.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Aureen Martin. I am a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe, and I'm here on behalf of the National Indian Child Welfare Association. I'm on their board of directors. The National Indian Child Welfare Association, or NICWA, is a national American Indian and Alaska Native organization with over 25 years of experience in public policy development related to Native children and families. Our mission is twofold. First, we try to address the issues of child abuse and neglect through training, policy development, research, and community development. Our other main goal is to support compliance with the Indian Child Welfare Act. The primary focus of my testimony today will be BIA programs serving Native children and families, and so it's going to actually dovetail well with Aaron's testimony. Before I go into my comments, though, I would like to thank the committee and its staff for their, I'm not trying to suck up. But
Go ahead, it's
but
good.
for your support of child welfare and social service programs for Indian tribes. Without your support, the situation would be so much worse, and I do really appreciate your efforts to help Indian country. So as Aaron discussed, Native children are placed in foster care at a much higher rate than those children in the general population. And in fact, in some states, the level is 10 times as many children. Yet tribal governments are some of the most underfunded when it comes to programs that deal with these issues. And in some situations, they don't have any direct access at all and have to go through states for funding. Some examples of that are the Social Services Block Grant, Medicaid, and the Mental Health Block Grant. We also know, and studies have shown, that the surest way to reduce the number of children in the child welfare system is to have full capacity to treat the children while they're still in the home, but also when they're in state care. And although federal law recognizes the tribe's rights, their inherent sovereign rights to intervene in child welfare cases and to provide services for their children, with the lack of funding, it makes it extremely difficult to enforce your rights or to provide basic services. So it's for these reasons that we provide our recommendations. I'm really going to talk about three. We've got additional recommendations in our written testimony, but our priority recommendation is that Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act grant programs, it's a mouthful, so I have to always read it, be funded at $43 million. And this act, the Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act, was enacted in 1990 to address the lack of reporting, investigation, and treatment and prevention of child abuse in Indian country. It sought to do two things. One, to identify incidents of abuse and family violence in Indian country and to reduce those incidents, and also to provide funds for mental health treatment for victims of abuse and family violence. It created mandatory reporting requirements and required background checks for professionals that deal with Native children, and it's been pretty successful in addressing those incidents. However, the other main goal of the act was to provide funding for abuse prevention and mental health treatment for Native families, particularly children who've been abused. And that's never been funded. And we feel that particularly right now with all of the attention on VAWA and domestic violence, that children who are the victims of these situations as well receive treatment. Our other request, or our second request, is to fund ICWA programs both on and off reservation. The on-reservation ICWA funding was originally intended to help tribes provide basic social services for ICWA cases. And it's been successful, but it's woefully underfunded. And so if there is, it's funded about $19 million right now, but if and almost every tribe receives it. However, over 2/3 of the tribes receive less than $30,000. And with that $30,000, the list of things that they have to do is long. They have to provide child protective services, family reunification and rehabilitation services. They have to provide case management. They have to recruit and retain foster care families and provide adoption services. And that's not even enough money for one full-time position. Additionally, off-reservation ICWA programs provide the same services as an on-reservation ICWA program, but they've not been funded for a number of years. With 67% of the Native population living off-reservation, we feel it's vitally important to provide those services. I'll sum up. We know that prevention, early intervention, and treatment of childhood trauma saves not only lives, but money. And because children who experience violence are more likely to have problems and end up in the system later. So that's the reason for our recommendations, and I thank you for your opportunity to testify.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Black.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Black Jr. I serve as the Executive Director for the Navajo Hopi Land Commission. I was recently appointed by the Navajo Nation President Jonathan Nez. I also want to introduce myself and my Navajo Clanship Protocol. Robert Key Black Jr. Dashijanido, Ado Ashi, Tanjakina, Nishling or Totachini, Bashishin, Ado Tlane, Dashichedo, Ado Kintachini, Dashinal, and thank you for the introduction. Chairwoman McCollum, Ranking Member Joyce, members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the Navajo Hopi Land Commission Office of the Navajo Nation. We thank the subcommittee for its commitment to bringing a humane end to the tragedy of Navajo relocation. We are deeply appreciative of the subcommittee's 2015 visit to the Navajo Nation to witness firsthand the effects of relocation. We are also thankful for the increased funding that the subcommittee provided, which accelerated the process whereby the Office of Navajo Hopi Indian Relocation provides homes to Navajo relocatees. In addition, we thank the subcommittee for hosting a roundtable last June to discuss the remaining obligations of ONER. We continue to believe that the United States made a commitment to provide infrastructure for the people who were relocated and that this promise has remained unfulfilled. However, one idea that came out of the roundtable could make a big difference. ONER is authorized to call upon any department or agency of the United States to assist in carrying out the relocation plan. In the Commission's 1983 report and plan update, the agency stated that its intention to initiate coordination efforts to establish joint governmental agency involvement for future relocation to deal with such areas as employment, roads, utilities, and like areas of need. However, there has been insufficient involvement by other agencies with the funding necessary to fulfill Congress's promises. If other resources can be brought to bear, much can be accomplished. We therefore urge the subcommittee to include language in the appropriations report supporting this multi-agency approach. We must also note that there are a couple hundred Navajos who can potentially appeal their negative determinations. A number of them will succeed, so additional housing will still need to be constructed. If these appeals reveal any concerns with the eligibility determination process, those concerns will also need to be addressed. The Padres Mesa demonstration rents has been a success and must be protected through any ONER transition. Padres Mesa has taught relocatees to the benefits of cattle management, range management, and beef cattle marketing to produce a brand known as Navajo beef, which is recognized for its quality and generates nearly twice the economic return as the families previously realized. In 1966, Commissioner of Indian Affairs Robert Bennett imposed a development freeze that lasted for 40 years, devastating a 1.6 million acre area encompassing 9 Navajo chapter communities. Going back to the War on Poverty and the Great Society program, and continuing through numerous federal economic and anti-poverty initiatives, as well as programs directed at Indians in particular, this area was ineligible for aid. For the former Bennett Freeze area to recover there must be a sustained development program. The nation fully supports the need for an independent and adequate audit of veneer, which Interior has suggested it would undertake. The Navajo Nation strongly encourages that any audit include assessments of the relocation houses and relocating facilities that O'Neill built. The nation and O'Neill have long disagreed over the workmanship of those homes and facilities. We believe that the best way to resolve those issues is with an amendment, with an independent audit to ensure that the relocatees who receive shoddy houses and facilities can have them repaired. The Navajo Nation understands that O'Neill has remained open for longer than the federal government originally expected, but that is not the fault of the nation nor the relocatee families, who still have not received the full benefit of the promises that were made for them to leave their lands. The Navajo Nation is deeply appreciative of the support and compassion of the subcommittee, and we request that this subcommittee continue to work and advocate for the United States to honor its commitments. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much. Mr. Joyce, any questions or thoughts?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't necessarily have any questions. I hear what you have to say. I appreciate the opportunity of spending the last 2 days listening to dozens of witnesses who have testified about the IHS, the BIA, BIE, and our failure to live up to our understandings into the treaties and obligations and our need to do so. And it gives me a better understanding, and I'm sure that my colleagues would agree, to work on the rest of our committee and the rest of our the rest of our body here to do what's necessary in the Interior bill this year to take care of as best we can. As you know, we're always hamstrung by the amount of money we can get, but I know that our chairwoman is in there fighting hard to get us a bigger number than we even had last year so we can distribute it accordingly. So thank you all, because I know you've come from a long way to be here, and I certainly appreciate your taking the time to teach us of our failures.
Yes, thank you, and I would certainly echo as you heard, the chair had to pop over to one of our other committees, but I concur with everything Mr. Joyce had to say, and do believe we're going to work hard to try to increase the funding levels. And the testimony that we have had and that you've been a part of over the last couple of days is just a constant reminder of how we're not meeting our treaty and obligations, and you know, we don't want to be the people responsible for allowing that to continue. And I just wanted to point out too, I really appreciate the work you're doing on childhood trauma and family separation. I've learned a lot from some of the work that's been going on in Maine, and people really digging into their past about what challenges they faced personally being separated at a young age. And, you know, it's just clear this country's made so many mistakes along the way. You know, let's try to help people, you know, work through it in their own lives, but also just make sure we just stop making some of those horrible mistakes again. So again, thank you very much on behalf of the committee for being here. I think this is, we are going to adjourn with you guys, so thanks for wrapping it all up and doing such a nice job. This committee is adjourned.